Greetings everybody, and welcome to your video series on an introduction to sociology. The topic for this video is the sociological imagination. Let's get started. What exactly is the sociological imagination? This was a concept developed by Wright Mills. Very important concept in sociology and a tool that we'll be using throughout the semester. We're going to talk a few minutes about that today, but to get us started, let's think about the COVID-19 pandemic. Here are some statistics on the loss during this pandemic based on race and ethnicity. If we look at this chart, we can see the first number there in the red bar represents the COVID-19 deaths during the year 2020, which was the first full year of the pandemic. The second figure after the slash represents all deaths for that particular racial or ethnic group. So for Hispanics, 68,469 lives were lost to COVID-19 out of 304,488 lives, Hispanic lives lost altogether that year. So the COVID deaths represent about 23% of all losses by Hispanics for that year. Similarly, American Indian, 24,279 total deaths, 4,504 were COVID, representing about 18%. We move on down to whites. The total loss of life that year, 2,467,419. Of those, 228,328 were COVID, representing only about 9% of all white deaths that year. Obviously, there's a lot more deaths by white people that year, given that there are a majority of white people in our country at this particular time. The point is, we can see that COVID-19 hit Hispanic and Latino groups, American Indian or indigenous groups, a lot harder than it did white folks. And then we can also look at the Asian and Black numbers there as well, a little bit less than Hispanic and indigenous. So the sociological imagination is all about trying to look at this and figure out, well, what happened during this pandemic that really infected or affected all of us, right? But somehow it hit our Hispanic and indigenous communities a lot harder. So sociology really kind of comes alive here and tries to figure out what was going on with these particular groups that allowed this virus to hit so hard. So the sociological imagination is really defined as an awareness of the relationship between a person's behavior and experience and the wider culture that shaped that person's behaviors and experiences. Again, developed by a very famous sociologist by the name of Wright Mills. He was really trying to look at, when we look at human behavior, what part of that behavior can we assign to the individual as a personal problem, something they need to address, something they need to fix, versus a social issue, something that is impacting lots of people, that society, that we all have a vested interest in, trying to figure out what's going on and what do we need to do to help. COVID-19, unfortunately, was a very good example of how the sociological imagination really works. When we think about COVID-19 in those early years, there are lots of examples where we can assign personal responsibility to somebody, either following protocols and doing what the experts suggested, versus the social issue where at times it didn't matter what we did, we were still at risk of getting infected with COVID-19. So put another way, the sociological imagination is the understanding that some personal problems experienced by an individual are really social issues shared by many people that are beyond an individual's control. Let's think about this a little more deeply. I always like to say everybody loves a baby, right? Everybody gets excited when there's a newborn on the way. Everybody loves to look at babies and hold babies. I'm guessing when this picture popped up, a lot of you went, "Oh," because they're cute, they're adorable, they're innocent, they're not engaging in horrific behaviors or making terrible choices for the most part. But these babies grow up, don't they? They grow up to be adults, to make choices and decisions on their own. And so the question becomes, or the next question we could ask is, does everybody love a homeless person or a person who is without a home or an unhoused person? As these pictures pop up on the screen, where's the "aw"? After all, weren't each of these adults once a baby too? Now, let's think about the causes of homelessness and see if we can apply the sociological imagination here. What do you think causes homelessness? Think about this question. Think about some reasons that pop up into your mind as you think about how someone ends up without a home or ends up on the street. Some common responses can include, well, some people choose to be homeless. The economy might be a reason why some people end up homeless. Housing costs or the lack of affordable housing. Maybe laziness. People just don't want to work, don't want to do what they need to do to secure safe and a nice home. Debt, maybe too much debt, not being able to pay credit cards and losing everything. Divorce, perhaps. Substance abuse comes up a lot, as does mental illness, loneliness. So as you think about these 9 reasons why someone might be experiencing homelessness, now we want to think about, according to the sociological imagination, which of these would be a personal responsibility that an individual is responsible for and needs to do something about, versus a social issue, something that's impacting lots of people that individuals really don't have much control over. Well, we could say that choice and laziness might fall under the personal responsibility. People, if someone is making a choice to live on the street, that's certainly a personal responsibility of theirs, or laziness might be something more personal. On the social side, we can put things like the economy. We don't, as individuals, have a lot of power or say over how the economy is performing. As individuals, we don't have a lot of say over housing costs and whether affordable housing exists in our communities. So what about the other reasons? Somebody might say, well, substance abuse could be a personal responsibility. People choose to pick up drugs or alcohol. Divorce, people choose to get a divorce. Debt, if you're choosing to spend too much on Amazon or at Amazon online, that's your personal responsibility. Loneliness might be something personal. That leaves us with mental illness. Still not quite sure where to put that one. Wright Mills might come along, again with the sociological imagination, and flip this up a little bit and say, even something like substance abuse and mental illness might be more social rather than personal. What does he mean by that? Well, if you think about how our culture is operating, how our society is functioning, whether we are providing resources and treatment centers for substance abuse, or whether people are living in areas where there isn't a lot of resources, a lot of information or help with substance abuse, then maybe that's a social issue. If we think about the recent and ongoing opioid epidemic, where people were going to doctors for sprained ankles or broken bones, and they were being prescribed Oxycontin, not being told the addictive natures of it, that could fall under more of a social issue, according to Wright Mills. Now, some of you might be saying, okay, well, if all of these are social, even things like choice and laziness, see, Wright Mills would say, hey, if we're looking at someone's level of laziness, we also want to look at what is the environment they're being raised in? What are their parents' work ethics like? Where are they learning these behaviors? If that is something that is part of their family history, he would say, then that is also could fall under the social category as opposed to personal. Now, some of you might be saying, okay, well, what about personal responsibility? As individuals, aren't we really responsible for our own lives, decisions, and choices? Can we really blame everything on society? Well, of course not. We're not here to shift the blame from the individual to society. We're just here to expand our perspective and suggest that some things that we want to blame the individual for, we do need to take a look at the role of our environment and the role of society and try to understand how is that impacting an individual's choices and behaviors. So as a review, the sociological imagination is the understanding that some personal problems experienced by an individual are really social issues shared by many people that are beyond an individual's control. So when we think about the unhoused population or people who are living on the streets, the sociological imagination helps us to say people don't choose to live on the streets necessarily. People end up living on the streets, often through a series of factors that may be beyond their control. That's going to do it for now. Thanks for checking in. Never stop learning, and remember, sociology is everywhere.